Let's go.
Oh dear. Yeah, Gremlins again. As let's have a look. Footage just said, yeah, Gremlins again. I don't know what's going on with that. I tested it before I came online this morning, and it was all fine. And there we are. It's let me down again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How the devil are you doing? And good morning to Chris Ford. Has already said goodbye, and he just said hello again. Short show today. Yes, yes. Set myself up for this. I am going to have to restart the entire system, I think. Don't know what's going on with that. Dan Callan has just said Monday morning blues. Weird thing was we had issues last week, so I actually came in early this morning, fired it up. Everything seemed to be fine. Apparently not. Peter McKenna says, I think it's crashed. It didn't quite crash. It almost crashed. I restarted. So my apologies. Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Let's hope we can overcome the gremlins. Hope you're all fit and well. Hope you all had a good weekend. It is Monday, of course, and so I have a new column for your reading pleasure today. It's called How Many is Too Many? And it basically asks the question, just how many UK demolition companies need to collapse before the wider industry finally admits that something is wrong? We've already said goodbye. The bearded plant operator said it's good, but it's not quite right. Yes, it's not quite right, but I think we're past the worst. Yes, how many will need to collapse before the industry takes note? We've already lost 6 of our number in just 4 months, but the powers that be remain very, very tight-lipped. Are they secretly working on a solution? Maybe. Or are they fiddling while Roden burns? Seems more likely, yes. Good morning, everyone. Everybody that's just rejoined. I don't know quite what went wrong this morning. Yes, Chris Ford has rightly said. There you are. Monday morning issues. Everybody has them. Yes, indeed. Okay, we'll come back to all of that in just in a moment. I don't know. Our WhatsApp group has mentioned the fact that I think it was a groundworking company has gone pop over round about Hertfordshire, apparently. And I've not had a chance to check all of this out because getting this show ready, but apparently they had very close links to a company that's already gone pop. So does that mean that's why it's happened? I do need to very quickly fire up. Bear with me 1 second. Yes, if you want to read today's column, you can now find a link to it in the chat. But if you're a member of our WhatsApp group, don't worry about taking down a note of exactly what that link is, because you don't need to. It's already over in the WhatsApp group. Now, we do have, bearing in mind we're talking about companies going pop and, the downside of the industry, and I know Footy wants to talk about the downside of the industry because he still sat there twiddling his thumbs. Got a really interesting film for you today that details how the UK has basically lost or is losing its ability to build. I'm sure it's going to give you plenty of food for thought and a good excuse for a chat as well. Plus, there's another one of these up for grabs. JCB hat. It's got the VIP visitor thing on the back, but we're going to do something a bit different today. In order to win it, we need you to come up with a creative, funny, or appropriate name for today's Mystery Machine. We're doing the Mystery Machine slightly differently today, so if you'd like to take part in that, have your creative juices flowing before we get there. So without further ado, let me roll the intro, which I hope works. Post to the question of the day. Hope that works too. And let's get this show on the road. It is Monday, the 4th of March, and I need to just temporarily remove Dan from the chat. It is Monday, the 4th of March. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, JCB's epic new backhoe loaders. Why has Britain lost the ability to build? The ladies of John Deere, Parks and Recreation, Bobcat-style, and we're taking you behind the levers of a Cat 974. And as I already said, for one day only, we are changing up our mystery machine slot, and there is a prize up for grabs. So let's do this now. Rather than bringing up an image of a machine, I'll tell you what, let me play the usual animation first, and then we'll come back to it. Yeah, under normal circumstances at this point in the show, I will be showing you a little bit of a machine that I wanted you to identify. Doing it differently today, just for once, just to make things a little bit different. We have a video of a machine that we filmed a few years ago. To say it's weird is probably understating things. I know what it's actually called, and I don't want anybody to bore me with what it's actually called. But if you were given the job of naming the machine I'm about to play you, what would you call it? I want it to be funny, creative, appropriate. What you take your pick. What would you call a machine that looks like this? Yes, now just to be clear, the bearded plant operator suggested giant piano hammer 6000. I quite like that. It's quite a mouthful. I think we could do better. Just to be absolutely clear, just to let you know exactly what that machine was doing. It wasn't doing compaction. It was actually breaking up concrete. It was actually breaking up concrete. We've had a few good suggestions already, but please keep them coming. I will be playing it again a little bit in a bit later in the show. So while you're thinking about that, as I say, we're looking for something funny, creative, appropriate. You take your pick. You go whichever direction you feel like. While you're mulling that over, let's go back to our question of the day. Yeah, our photo, no, our question of the day, should I say, is quite simply, what photo or image are you using as a wallpaper or screensaver on your mobile phone, and why? Now, I'll be honest, I've had a load over the years. I've had my dogs. I'm not doing these in order, by the way. I've had my dogs. I've had my wife. For a while, it was a photograph that I took while I was in Japan, and I've had a variety a big variety of very hot-looking ladies, many of them sporting tattoos. Let's not dwell on it. But my wallpaper now is just plain black. There is no image. It's just plain black. Not a reflection of my mood, I hasten to add, just merely removing distraction. But what about you? When you switch on your phone or you go to your home screen, what image greets you? Let us know in the chat. We'll come back to that at the end of the show. You will recall a week or two ago, we brought you our film of the latest JCB backhoe loaders. Very proud of that film, I have to say, particularly as it's shot in about 15 minutes and it was chucking it down with rain while we were there. But the JCB film crew clearly had more time and much better weather. Has the humble backhoe loader ever looked quite that epic before? I don't think it has. Absolutely fantastic. We've had some more entries incoming in for naming our machine. Great video, JCB says Dan Cullen. I wish JCB would use the sound of an engine in their marketing. The music doesn't sell it in any way. Oh, are you kidding? I thought that was epic. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Had the sound cranked right up here. I did. That was the high point of UK construction stuff. We're going to be going to the low point of UK construction stuff immediately after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
There was a time, not so long ago actually, when the UK was a construction world leader. We had the best roads, the best railways, the best bridges. Our architects and our construction people were in demand around the world. But just recently, it seems that our capabilities have declined. We've been hampered by excessive bureaucracy and governmental interference, and we have allowed costs to spiral out of control. And I'm about to show you a film that brings all of that together. I thought this film was absolutely fascinating, but there's one bit in particular that I would really like you to look out for. It's about 3/4 of the way through the film, and the film itself is about 8 minutes long, I think. Please pay attention when the video compares the cost of our Crossrail network compared to a similar project in Spain. I promise you, it's going to make your eyes water. Now, let me bring the film up and I'll show you exactly what it is we're talking about just as soon as I can find it.
Over the last few years, it's become clear that we might not actually be that good at building stuff. The government scrapped the HS2 rail project last year due to its spiralling costs. Investment in city metro networks and tram networks lags behind the rest of Europe, and the Hinkley Point C nuclear power station remains over budget and late. Britain used to be a great pioneer when it came to infrastructure. London is home to the oldest and one of the most expansive underground networks in the world. The Victorian era heralded in a new era of industrial revolution. So it's worth asking, where exactly did this all go wrong? And how did we get so much worse at building? Now, it's worth starting this video by explaining exactly how infrastructure projects are commissioned and run here in the UK. Back in 2012, the UK government introduced the Infrastructure Planning Commission, or IPC, which became responsible for any proposed nationally significant infrastructure projects, or NSIPs, in England and Wales. Now, the bar for nationally significant is actually not terribly high. Major rail and power station projects obviously fall into this category. However, even relatively small road connections somehow also do. Local councils are responsible for building small infrastructure projects, such as roundabouts. However, larger ones fall within the remit of the IPC. Weirdly, even something as seemingly simple as upgrading a single-track road to a dual carriageway is classified as a nationally significant infrastructure project, meaning that it has to go through the IPC. This is what happened to the A428, which connects Milton Keynes to Cambridge. Back in 2003, a regional transport study suggested that a 15-kilometre stretch of road should be upgraded to a dual carriageway. If things go to plan, this new road will be completed and opened in 2026, 23 years later. Now, this is one of the key reasons that infrastructure just doesn't get built. The process causes unnecessary delays, slows down building, and subsequently pushes prices up, which ultimately disincentivizes future infrastructure projects. The IPC is a non-departmental public body, meaning that while it's publicly funded, it's not part of the government, and is instead subject to scrutiny from Parliament. The body does, however, provide a recommendation to the Secretary of State, who then decides whether to proceed. The whole process is expected to take 18 months. However, unfortunately, these decisions are often late. Analysis has shown that of all the NSIPs in the last 10 years, 29% were delayed, and the average delay was 7 months. Unfortunately too, the average delay time and the percentage of projects delayed is getting longer and larger as time goes on. The average delay has increased from 17 months in 2012 to 22 months in 2020, and the percentage of projects delayed rose from 20% between 2012 and 2016 to 43% from 2017 onwards. And the thing is, delays on massive infrastructure projects can get very expensive very quickly. Inflation is obviously a key factor in this, and this has only been made worse in recent years because of global events like the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. The effect of this is that infrastructure construction costs rose by 25% between just January 2020 and September 2023 alone. So part of the high cost is simply down to the fact that projects are delayed and get more expensive as a result. But why are they getting delayed in the first place? Well, this is largely down to a failure of politics, specifically the fact that national policy statements are just not being updated. Now, national policy statements effectively set out the government's policy for NSIPs, and is something that developers use as a blueprint for their projects. So, if you're building a railway, you check the government's national policy statement for national networks to make sure that your plans align with what the government wants. They're meant to be updated every 5 years, but haven't been. No doubt in part due to the high churn of ministers in this time, and this has caused some pretty serious problems. For example, since the government last produced its national policy statement on roads in 2015, the Transport Secretary has said that we will use our cars differently and less often, and local councils have set out emissions targets. This means that legal challenges can be brought against projects that actually do meet criteria set out in national policy statements. And, well, this is something we've seen. Between 2010 and 2020, there were 16 judicial reviews of infrastructure planning decisions, and only 1 was successful. Since 2021, there have been 7, and 4 of these were successful. This means that developers have to sort of guess at what the government wants, and they have to put in a lot more effort to make sure that they aren't subject to costly legal challenges. This not only simply costs more money to produce, but also delays the project even further, in turn raising the costs further. So it's clear that there are a lot of interconnected bureaucratic reasons that infrastructure projects end up being so expensive here in the UK. And well, this has meant that all kinds of infrastructure in the UK has ended up being more expensive than our European counterparts. And in some cases, the UK has opted to simply not even embark on the projects in the first place. Take trams, for instance. The UK is home to the largest city in Western Europe that does not have a metro system, Leeds. There was a plan to build the Leeds Supertram network, but this was cancelled in 2005 after estimates put the cost of the project at about £1.6 billion. Just to be clear, had this estimate been accurate, it would have meant that it was almost twice as expensive per mile as the average French tramway. Even infrastructure projects that are viewed as successful cost far more than other countries. For example, the Elizabeth Line, or Crossrail, was opened back in 2022 and is now the busiest railway in Britain. However, even despite this, it cost a phenomenal £1.392 billion per mile. Only the New York subway can beat it on this price tag. When you consider that Madrid was able to build 81 miles of its subway network at only £68 million per mile, it becomes apparent just how expensive Crossrail's price tag actually is. So the question is, what should the UK do to fix this? Well, some believe that part of the solution is simply increasing investment. The National Infrastructure Commission claims that the UK needs to increase both its public and private sector investment from about £55 billion per year to between £70 billion and £80 billion. This is a significant increase and would be the largest increase since the Second World War. This would no doubt help Britain start to catch up with other comparable nations when it comes to infrastructure. Additionally, Sam Dimitriou, head of policy for Britain Remade, argues that, while there is no easy solution, a good start would be updating national policy statements, something that would at least start to ease the bureaucracy that stops the UK from building more. Perhaps the best outcome then would be a combination of the two. The first allowing for more infrastructure to be built, and the second making it quicker and easier for said infrastructure to be built.
There you are. Now, I realise that was not for everyone's cup of tea. Mick Norton says it's easy for TLDR News, whoever they are, to criticise the failings of UK construction. Codswallop. He goes on to say that TLDR newscaster would bring tears to a glass eye. I am not in agreement with that at all. I thought, well, let's go back to the very beginning of all of this. There is Dan Cullen immediately saying it's unbelievable how things have gone so bad. Ken Hatcher saying the cost of labour and the cost of materials. Now, bearing in mind, cost of materials, I realise there are some materials that we import and therefore we're going to be paying a premium for them. But really and truly, a lot of it is just stuff dug out of the ground for construction materials. Why are ours that much more expensive than anybody else's? Peter McKenna says, I agree. They've been saying they would have a main tram link in Preston for 12 years, an old bridge that's on the main cycle route around Preston. The council just informed everyone it won't be on the cycle route anymore when the new bridge is built, as it will be nearly 4 feet higher than the old bridge. 27% of it's 27% delayed. It's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. I think that was clear for all to see. Chris Ford says, does any government know what it wants? Normally just hot air to get you to vote for them, then whoosh, out the window it goes. Peter McKenna does actually say who TLDR is. They are an independent online media group. That's absolutely right. And they do cover a lot of subjects. And I realise it's very easy to take a sky-high view of these things and potentially play up the negatives. But I will remind you, Crossrail. The cost of Crossrail, £1.3 billion per mile. The same kind of a project in Spain, £68 million. £68 million. Just to save you doing the maths, the Spanish can deliver a project for a 7-figure sum. Here in the UK, it's a 9-figure sum. How does that make any sense whatsoever? There is Dan Cullen saying exactly the same thing. Wow, that's a big difference in price tags. Yes, if you were looking very closely, you may well have seen a bit of Armac in all of that. Let's have a look. These things take time, says Jim Turner. The county council just bought 100 acres next to me. They say it's for tree planting, but I already know it's for a road. It's much easier to buy lumps of land at the right price, and then build a road, then sell either side for development, therefore paying for the road. Much better than having compulsory purchase order, just enough land for the road, and compensating the farmer for inconveniencing them whilst the job is being done. An increase in planning officers would help. It would. Now, listen, I mean, I realise going back to our mayoral candidate who said he was Batman, maybe not the best idea, but planning is a complete ball ache. I mean, think about planning just. I think we mentioned this on the show. When you look at the nation's high streets, which are dying on their arse, let's be absolutely honest. I think they were dying anyway, but then we had the COVID pandemic and obviously the ensuing lockdown. So as a result of that, a lot of people, even people that had never shopped online before, did and have been reluctant to go back to the high streets for one reason or another. My two local high streets, really and truly, are made up mainly of coffee shops or of charity shops, neither of which will attract commuters into the shops. Why not? Why not come up with a plan whereby you take those empty shops and convert them into accommodation in some way? A lot of them have got accommodation above them already, but they are generally storerooms for the shop below and that kind of thing. Could we not be a bit more sensible? Let's have a look. Chris Ford also says, I think a lot of people are making a lot of money out of the British public. Think about this. We saw the cancellation of the Birmingham to Manchester leg of HS2. I fundamentally disagree with that decision, and I'll preempt what I'm about to say with that. But did the industry really cover itself in glory, having already escalated and escalated and escalated the cost of the bit of HS2 that is going ahead? I just how can the Spanish build for 68 million what it costs us 1.3 billion to build? That's more than it's way over 10 times the cost. How does that make any sense? Peter McKenna says an empty BHS in Preston has been turned into a small farm. Interesting take on it. I like the idea. Graham Footy says that HS2, that ticket all the way to Birmingham, wanted to go to Scotland. What's up with bringing it down to Devon and Cornwall? You've got no chance, is the easy answer. I think the government has taken a look at the cost and quite possibly the popularity, but taking a look at the cost of the bit of HS2 that is going ahead and just gone, nah, we're not going to press ahead with that. And there's a bit of me that wonders if that is the industry's own fault. I've mentioned this before. I went onto one of the HS2 sites down in Old Oak Common in London, and it was so incredibly overly bureaucratic. You know, when you go to a restaurant, a high-end restaurant, and it turns out, there's 15 people actually eating, but there's 47 people serving them. That's what HS2 looked like. To have an entire permanent, I don't even mean temporary, an entire permanent building there that was built purely to house some nurses to do alcohol and drugs testing. And I'm saying this as a believer in alcohol and drugs testing, and I realise, potentially dangerous. They want to be they want to be seen to be doing everything they can, but how much does that add to the cost? And the fact that, I mean, I got through that process just to take some photographs in the space of about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. The guys that were actually going there to drive machines and to actually work on the construction side, they had to dedicate an entire day. How much does a day cost? 250, 300 quid for somebody? And there were dozens of them. And this is a rolling program. This isn't just that they hadn't put that on for the day I was there. That was for everyone. How much is that costing in lost time just to tick a box? Peter McKenna says, reread my last comment, Mark, not small snail. What? Ah, okay. An empty BHS in Preston's been turned into a snail farm. I saw small farm, a snail farm. A snail farm. Wow. Just before Chris Ford does it, because I know he's likely to, why did the snail paint an S on the side of his car? So that people would say, look at that escargot. Yes, the old ones are the best. Chris Ford says HS2 is a prime example of how to waste money. The concept is a good idea, but nobody has kept a lid on costs. Hence, it's become too expensive. Argue amongst yourselves. There is no argument. There is no argument. That is precisely the case. And listen, I want construction companies and demolition companies to get their pound of flesh. They work really seriously hard, often in dangerous, hazardous, toxic environments. All of that I take all of that on board. But how you can go from 68 million per mile in Spain to 1.39 billion here in the UK, someone somewhere along the line is taking the piss. They absolutely are. From Craig, late. I did rush. Good morning, all. Good morning, Craig. Craig, thank you for joining us. Jim Turner says planning is and probably always will be geared towards the big developers. There's no fixed rules, far too many blurred lines. If smaller firms could build like the big boys do, it would be much better for the local economy. Local trades and suppliers would be used more often, therefore boosting spending locally. Just want to sort of wind back. One of the points that they were making there was the way that government treats individual projects, like a little roundabout in a rural location or a little single track road in a rural location goes before government. So why do we not just pass that down to local authorities who actually know what that part of the world looks like? Makes no sense to me. For KPMG, I had a week's induction. That's before even getting on site because of bureaucracy. A week of induction. What is the cost of that? And there's Andy Darwell saying, morning, guys. Sorry I'm late. Been uploading attachments off a wagon. Not a problem. No need to apologise. Good to have you here, Andy. Thank you for joining us. Now, we will carry on all of that chat after this stuff and nonsense. Let's have a look at this. With the possible exception of Caterpillar, is there a more manly brand in the world of construction equipment than John Deere? It's a brand beloved of manly men and has a reputation built on beards and testosterone. But as Bob Dylan sang, the times, they are a-changing.
I don't treat it as if I'm any different than a man out there. I'm going to get in there and get just as dirty as they are. The firm handshake and a smile, and say that my name is Michelle and I'm here to do the job. I am an internal foreman here at Murphy Tractor. I started in this type of work back in high school. I went to a 2-year VOTEC program for diesel technology, and then that continued on through college. Then was a tech for a couple of years and then moved into the office. My day-to-day is I get here and I make sure all my techs are lined up with jobs for the day, and if they have any questions, they can come ask me and we can work through it together. Every day is different. You have to be able to stop and do a U-turn at any time. What motivates me to be the best in my job is I always want to wake up wanting to go to work, get to my goals that I've set in life, and I never want to come to work and not enjoy what I'm doing. I think more women should be out in this field. Anything I can do to help make their journey a little bit easier, I'm going to do it. Whether that be going to talk to the younger generation at trade schools about it and just saying, hey, you can do this. I love working with Sarah. We kind of bounce ideas off of each other. We have the best of time in the office. You got to link arms when you're in this industry.
My dad had his own construction company, and he had 2 bulldozers, a track hoe, a scraper, among some other things. And that's kind of where my love came from for construction equipment. I've always been the type of person that likes to work with my hands. I was really persistent. I wanted to work here. I put in my application, went through my interview, and then that afternoon they called me and told me that I had the job, and I've been working here ever since. If I really want to do something, I'm going to do it. My dad always told me that I could do anything I put my mind to, and that has been true. Anything that they decide to throw at me, I'll take it on. I care about the work that I do, and my name is on that. So I want to make sure that it's done right. I think I am empowering other women by being a service technician. I think if more women were to apply in this industry, they would be pleasantly surprised that they would be able to get their foot in the door. Women that might be afraid of hearing no trying to get into the industry, I would suggest you might hear yes. So just try, don't give up, just keep trying.
Yeah, sisters are doing it for themselves. Quite right, too. It is. I want to make this very clear. It is Women in Construction Week this week, but I didn't play that film for that reason. I'm now at the point where I don't actually think we should even have a Women in Construction Week. Not because I'm anti-women in construction, quite the opposite. I think we should now, as an industry, be grown up enough to have a People in Construction Week. We should have gone past this whole singling out women thing by now. Unbelievable that it's still going on. Let's have a look. Mick Norton says those American girls are a credit to Murphy's and John Deere stateside. I totally agree. Peter McKenna takes a slightly more acerbic view on things. Good that she wants to do the work. Most young lasses are more interested in selling their farts and toenail clippings on OnlyFans. I don't think that's all women, to be honest. Jim Turner, and he and I are of the same mind here. Doesn't matter what sex, colour, gay or straight. If they sound people, then that's fine. The rest doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter to me either. Shouldn't matter to anyone, in my humble opinion. Now, if you were here at the beginning of the show, and I know some of you weren't, but if you were here at the beginning of the show, we're doing our mystery machine slightly different today. I don't want you to identify a machine. I want you to name one. I'm going to replay the video again in just a second. I'm looking for funny, creative, appropriate names for the machine you're about to see. So to the likes of Craic and to Andy Darvell, who arrived late, I'm not singling you out. You arrived late, not a problem. We're going to replay this for you because I want you to be with a chance of winning the JCB hat, which is up for grabs. There you are. That's the JCB hat. It looks like that, and it looks like that. It's up for grabs for the best answer on the naming of this machine. Here we go. Yes, if we can come up with a good name for that. And I'll tell you now, we've had a really good entry from our friend Bearded Plant Operator over on Instagram, and we've had an absolute corker from Gary Muirhead as well. It might be a toss-up between the two of those. Now, yes, let's have a bit of this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
We're about to show you a machine that's kind of fallen out of fashion a bit. So much so that I think a few of today's younger operators may never get the chance to climb behind the levers of a Cat 973 track loader. So here is what you're missing. Yeah, I don't know about you guys. I've sat in one or two track loaders over the years, but I don't recall ever actually driving one. Really, I was really racking my brains when I saw that this morning. As I say, been in a few, particularly over at Malaga, the Caterpillar Proving Ground over at Malaga, but I don't remember actually making one turn a track in anger. Anyone else have fond memories of the Cat 973? Or come to mention it, the 963 or the 953? Let us know. Let us know in the chat. I'm going to be going through the Mystery Machine contributions in just a moment. I think I've decided on our winner, actually. But first, we need to look at another of our Intermat exhibitors. There's actually no need for an introduction on this one. I'll simply let the film speak for itself while I collate the suggestions for a name for our mystery machine of the day. Take it away, Bobcat.
My name is Ayana Williams. I'm with NRPA, the National Recreation and Park Association. We partner with Bobcat to do a project where we are putting in all the things you need for the type of ecosystem that's really going to bring in the pollinators and just a whole habitat.
This was a grant we were very fortunate to get from Bobcat and made this all possible, so we appreciate that more than I can say. But this has been like a dream come true.
With the Bobcat sponsorship, it has really made things available that we would not be able to do. It expands the amount of what resources we're able to put in other areas. And it's with corporate sponsors like Bobcat that really help make this park a reality.
This today is really special for me because I got to participate and give back to where I come from. To be able to work for a company that gives back specifically for the newer generations like my grandchildren.
To me, that's one of the biggest things is investing back into our communities. If we don't invest in our communities, we're not going to grow, we're not going to have future prosperity. Places like this give the community something to come and see and just enjoy nature and spend time and kind of decompress from a day of working.
It's going to help the community itself. It's also going to help the bees, the butterflies, all our native insects from the pollinator side. It's also going to help keep clean water. So this is the way to help keep our drinking water safe and clean.
So it's important to us at Bobcat Company to bring together community involvement and really show how our equipment can show up in spaces that are more than the construction site or the backyard.
People who are working every day and making a living and raising families need places to go that are pleasing in nature. All that's important to people.
Yeah, well done, to Bobcat for their sponsorship of that initiative. So let's take a look at our Mystery Machine entries so that I can pick a winner. I've actually picked a winner. I'm going to tell you right now. That was an early contender, the banger. Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good suggestion. Gary Muirhead, the spoiled child. Looks like it's stamping its feet. It does indeed. Peter McKenna, ground stabilization machine. Good answer, but that's not what it was doing, so I skipped that. Dan Cullen suggested the Happy Feet 2000. I like that. Chris Ford, the Paver Raver. Yes, I can see that now. Let's have a look. Who else have we got? Rattling through. Dan Cullen says the headache 24/7. Yes, I think it probably would be. The self-propelled road wrecker or concrete jibber jabber, suggests Jim Turner. Dan Cullen has even come up with a tagline for the machine. Bang, and the concrete is gone. I like that. We're going to go rattling through. I'm trying to get to, there was another round of entries, which I'll get to in just a second. Now, for reasons I don't particularly understand, Peter McKenna has suggested the paedophile bone crusher machine. Not sure that's even the greatest taste. Craig has suggested hammer time. Yeah, like that. The monster stomper, says Chris Ford. All good entries. I actually got it down to, I think, 2. I like this. The Big Thumper 10,000 from our friend Gary Muirhead, but I'm going to declare the winner, our friend Bearded Plant Operator, over on Instagram. And I know you can't see this, but he has suggested that we call it the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, yes, reminiscent of my childhood. So Bearded Plant Operator, I'll drop you a line after the show. Get your postal address because you just won yourself a very nice JCB baseball cap. You may well have one. If you have, give it to a friend. But you have won. Congratulations. Chitty, chitty, bang, bang. It most certainly is. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second. I know there's a lot of chat that I haven't covered today, so I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But first of all, I'm going to leap gazelle-like over into the chat. If you can't stick around, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. I'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. for more of this sort of thing. If you do have the time and the inclination, however, I'll be back with the Craic, but without music. I'm not going to risk it. I'll be back with the Craic immediately after this. Yes, I'm not going to risk the music. It's clearly got gremlins in it over the weekend. See, I realise that everybody talks about AI and computers and stuff all being infallible. I did Friday's show, and I came in here to, didn't touch the broadcast software at all. I came in here to write today's column yesterday. So this system that you're watching this on has had nobody touch it for 3 days, or 2.5 days. And yet it went wrong. Nobody has been near it. It's gone wrong. My apologies. So good morning, everybody. And there's Dan Cullen, first off the mark as always. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and filthy animals alike. Yes. Good morning, in particular to the filthy animals. Footy is unfortunately back at home again, having been laid off late last week, Thursday, I think it was. Gary Muirhead says, good morning, Mark. Good morning, guys. Now, I can't actually remember. I've taken a lot of suggested questions a day from Gary, and I've put them into a system, and I put a star against them. The one that I used today didn't have a star against it, but I've got a funny feeling it was Gary's. Gary, if you came up with that, my apologies. You feel free to claim credit for it. We'll come to that in a second. Peter McKenna has said good morning, and there is Footy, there is Chris Ford. Good morning, drivers. Jim Turner, Ken Hatcher, all present and correct. And then the whole thing went pear-shaped. There you are. Just to prove the point. Home in bed again, no hot work. Hopefully something comes today, but I don't know. I know we're going to come back to all things about that TLDR news report. What a waste of resource. bearing in mind, we are still claiming, despite the fact that there has been a downturn in work, unquestionably, we are still claiming to be in the grip of a skill shortage, and yet we can lay off an experienced card-carrying operator and have him sat at home twiddling his thumbs. How does that make any sense at all? Answers on a postcard. Mark Whiting joined us. Chris Ford joined us and said goodbye because I left for a little while. Peter McKenna, what happened now? Yes, what did happen now? Footy correctly identified it. It was the Gremlins. Think it's crashed. It didn't crash. I personally restarted it. Yeah, Monday morning issues. Everybody has them. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with it now. There is my weekly column. It's called How Many is Too Many. You can read that should you so desire over in the chat. If you're a part of our WhatsApp group, don't bother noting that down because it's already there for you. Yeah, just reiterating the fact that times is hard out there. Peter McKenna says another 5 haulage companies went last week, bringing the total to 40 since January. 40. And I realise you're talking about haulage there, and my column is talking about demolition. But at what point do the powers that be say, hey, hang on a minute, Houston, we have a problem, we need to do something about this? And I don't know what that doing something is about it. I mean, acknowledging it would be a starting point, but to actually call the industry together and say, what are we going to do? What can we possibly do to stave off another 6 demolition companies going pop, or another 5 haulage companies going pop, or another 40 haulage companies going pop? Yeah, there was our question of the day. What image do you have as your phone wallpaper? And I can, just to prove mine, there you go. That's what mine looks like. It's black with a lot of thumbprints. It's just plain black. What about you? What do you have as your phone wallpaper? Jim Turner says, don't have one. Bizarrely, it looks like I don't have one, but mine is specifically, I actually downloaded just some black just to make that specifically for it. Chris Ford says, I've no idea. I better have a look. Jim Turner says, I just like it plain or black. Peter McKenna says, I've got an AI dove because my late mother loved them. That's a nice one, like that. I actually had a friend of mine, my best mate, who was sadly killed in a motorcycle accident for a while, but that one's gone as well. Too much of a reminder, to be honest. Ken Hatcher says, Apple's latest screensaver for the iPhone 15 Pro. It's what the phone came with. This goes back to the point that we were saying about setting up your machine. And I know somebody else has just, there you are. Chris Ford says, the wallpaper it came with, never really thought about changing it. Goes back to what I was saying about the whole notion of setting up your machine. Do you bother? Going to go over quickly to the bearded plant operator, our winner for today, talking about construction, and it's tough out there and all that. He says, cost of everything going up. Nobody can afford to pay for what needs to be done. It's just a race to the bottom. Yes, it most certainly is. And I think it was, I was out and about, so I only took a very quick look. I think it was Dan Cullen showed a photograph on our WhatsApp group of his shopping for the week, which, as a single bloke, and he's out and about quite a bit, I wouldn't say he had a lot of shopping by any means. The essentials, not much more than that. 85 quid. 85, I think it was 85 quid. How is that sensible? We had some more suggestions on our mystery machine. Spoiled child. Looks like it's stamping. It really did. Footy, he's wallpaper is a long reach digger that he was on with HE Services. Dan Cullen has got, just to be clear, he's got the 360 excavator that he's working for. He's operating at the moment. If anybody asks him what he does for a living, points at the screen. Bearded plant operator, back again. Lots of people taking employed seats at lower rates as the contractor work is unpredictable. All very true. Footy, he's wallpaper is a picture of the tattoos on his feet and head. Ouch. Ouch. Which one hurt the most? I've got a funny feeling your feet would really bloody hurt. I've got a couple of tattoos, both in fleshy bits of my body. I'm not going to bore you with it, and I'm not going to go into intimate details, but I've got a couple of tattoos, and I absolutely sailed through them to the point, I've said this before, one of the reasons I stopped at 2 was because I quite enjoyed the experience. That's not good. That when you realise, oh, I quite like the pain of that. That's a bit of a worry, that. So I stopped at 2. But what hurt the most, head or feet? Love to know. There is Mick Norton joining us. Good morning, Mick. Other suggestions for the road wrecker, the jibber jabber. I wish JCB would use the sound of an engine in their marketing. The music doesn't sell it in any way. Do you know, this is a conversation that I get into in over on Instagram a lot. And one that really annoys me is we take a drone video, put music to it, stick it on Instagram, and people come back and say, why didn't you just play the engine sound? Because a drone records without sound, you pillock. That's the absolute truth. But I listen, when you edit to music, I think you can make things look pretty damned epic. And there you are, just to show the difference in perception. Mick Norton says, wish JCB would use sound in their of engines. Flip side of that, Dan Cullen, great video, JCB. I'm with Dan on that, absolutely. Chris Ford says, once repaired a front diff on a 3CX and put it in a 180 degree out. All was good until the driver put it in 4-wheel drive, whereupon it tried to bury itself. Yes. Peter McKenna says, sounded like James Bond. I turned the sound right down. Music, see? It divides the nation. Who else have we got here? So we got into that TLDR discussion on the current parlor state of the UK construction sector. I say the sector, but it's more a case of what it does and what it's able to do. And it does feel like there's an awful lot of this stems from government. I mean, we had the news on, I think it was on Friday, that the High Court has now upheld Marks and Spencer's decision to demolish its flagship store on London's Oxford Street. If you've been following that story, Marks and Sparks said, this building is about 150 years old. We want to knock it down and make something much, much sexier and much more modern, meeting modern requirements for, thermal regulation and, modern building regs and all the things. They got planning permission, but it was kicked up to government. Government said, no, you don't, not on my watch. So it went to High Court. That's taken a year, plus all the legal fees that goes with that, and the fact that it took up High Court time. Do we really want to be devoting High Court time to deciding whether or not a building should be replaced? Is that really a good use of our resources? Good morning to Garvin over at Most Idiots. Good morning, David Hearn at LDH Attachments, also over on Instagram as well. Yeah, it's unbelievable how things have gone so bad. And as I say, it does. I realise HS2 did not cover us in glory, or cover the government in glory, but it does make you wonder. It does make you wonder. I wonder how many projects are considered, and then somebody says, do you know what? We'll never get that passed. Goes back to the whole Boris Island thing. Was Boris Island a good idea to put an airport in the Thames estuary? I'll leave you to decide. But the fact that we as a nation decided to can it because we considered it to be too ambitious. There was a time when ambitious was the watchword for Britain. That's why we ended up with our railways. That's why we ended up with the motorway network that we originally had. That's why we ended up with the London Underground network, because nothing was beyond our imagination. And if we could imagine it, we could deliver it. Now it's just namby-pamby. Oh, that looks quite hard. That looks quite expensive. What about the badgers? Ken Hatcher says it's the cost of labour and the cost of materials. I realise that labour. Listen, we know from the manufacturing sector, if you make something in China or Taiwan, it's cheaper than it is to make it here. I fully understand that. So there's, despite the fact that I think there should be a more level playing field, I realise that's not strictly possible. But the cost of materials, bearing in mind, we are largely self-sufficient in major things like aggregates. We have aggregates. We can still dig big holes in the ground and pull out aggregates of our own. So why are our materials so much more expensive than anybody else's? It's not like we're building with gold here, people. Good morning to Boss Demolition, who have joined us again. I read this one out, but there was talk of 12 years. 12 years they've been talking about a tram link in Preston. 12 years. Now, bearing in mind the way that planning works, I'll do the maths very quickly. Somebody back in 2012 sat down and said, the traffic situation in Preston is getting quite bad. What we need is a tram link. What do you reckon has happened to the traffic situation in Preston over the last 12 years? Do you reckon it's got better? Do you reckon people are using fewer cars or making fewer journeys? No. The level of traffic will have increased exponentially, and 12 years on, we're still just talking about it. 27% delayed. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the chiefs seem to be working for the government. Just saying. Let's have a look. There you are. That's a big price difference a big difference in price tags. I will reiterate. The Spanish built something very similar to Crossrail at a cost of £68 million per mile. £68 million per mile. That's not cheap. Bearing in mind they did actually build 80 odd miles of it, but £68 million per mile. Here in the UK, 1.39 billion. That's an additional couple of zeros, people. That's a lot of difference. Yes, there was a very quick glimpse of Armac in that TLDR video. We've done that one. Done that one. Chris Ford says, I think a lot of people are making a lot of money out of the British public. Yeah, they are. They are. And listen, it's hard to call this one because, ultimately we all work within the construction industry. I'll tell you now. Okay, so over the weekend, I wrote today's column, and I've written a headline. I haven't written any of the words that go under that headline, but the headline that I've written for something I will be writing in the very near future is an industry that is hard to love. About 10 years ago, I can't actually remember, but about 10 years ago, I wrote a children's book called My Dad Does Demolition. Proved fairly popular, and I was invited to go and do a tour of some local schools in and around Surrey to do readings to children, basically, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Really, really good. Getting to to expose young people to what demolition and construction is all about. And at the time, I was talking to them about all the big sexy diggers, and you work with a great bunch of people, and you can earn lots of money. And maybe if you're really good at what you do, you can travel overseas, and you can see the world because you've worked in construction here in the UK. And I meant every word of that. I wasn't using hyperbole. This was absolutely from the heart. I did believe 10 years ago that it was a fantastic course of action for a child to consider a career in construction. And then you look at it now. You look at the way that workers are treated. You look at the fact that they're picked up and put down whenever an employer sees fit. You see that the government can just put the kibosh on a project that potentially employed 20,000 odd people, just on a whim. You look at the level of accidents and, moreover, fatalities that occur within the industry. You look at the corruption that was uncovered initially with Demolition, 60 million quid's worth of fines there. And now they're investigating the house building industry, and they reckon, based on the fact that the fines are set, I think it's 10% of turnover. The fines, if the house building industry is found as guilty as the demolition industry was, you're looking at fines of £2.5 billion. £2.5 billion, or 1.5 miles of Crossrail. It's becoming an industry that is really, really difficult to love. I still do, but it's harder to do so, and you have to set aside an awful lot of what you know in order to retain that love. Anybody else got any thoughts on that? I'd love to hear from you. Chris Ford says HS2 is a prime example of how to waste money. Concept is a good idea, but nobody has kept a lid on costs. Hence, it's become too expensive. Argue amongst yourselves. I don't think there's any argument about that. Amotair. Hi, I'm watching you from Saudi Arabia. Good morning. Afternoon. I don't know what the time is in Saudi Arabia, but thank you for joining us. Good morning. Good morning here, anyway. I realise this is a ridiculous analogy to draw, because I realise there are scales and unforeseeables. But I've said this before. It's afternoon in Saudi Arabia, so good afternoon. If you said to a brickie, I would like you to build a wall at the end of my garden for reasons best known to yourself. And the brickie says, okay, well, I'll do you a quote. And he comes back and he says, to build that wall of the size and quality that you need is going to cost you £1,000, and it's going to take me a week. Fine. If it then takes 3 weeks and he hands you a bill for 3,000 quid, you'll be well within your rights to say, hang on, that's not what we agreed. And yet, when you get to a certain scale and volume of construction, like a Wembley Stadium, like Hinkley Point, like HS2, you could just make numbers up as you go along, and nobody seems to bat an eyelid. And I realise I'm not proposing this as an idea by any means, but if you are building something that's going to take 20 years to build, and 5 years in, you've already spent all of the budget that had been allocated, you'd be well within your rights, particularly as you're the government, to go back and say, all right, off you go then. We're not going to be ripped off any longer. You're clearly taking the piss here. On your bike, we'll get somebody else in to do it at a reasonable cost. But we don't. We just carry on, and then we get to the point where Rishi Sunak says, enough. We just won't do the second and probably more important part of HS2. Let's have a look. Some positive bits and pieces here for all the ladies working over with John Deere. Good on her. Nice to see women doing that sort of work. Quite totally agree. Peter McKenna says, good that she wants to do the work. I'm not going to dwell on the OnlyFans and selling of farts. That's a whole other story. Mick Norton says that those American girls are a credit to Murphy's and to John Deere stateside. I totally agree. That is why I'm not buying into Women in Construction Week. I don't believe we can have too many women in construction, so long as they're the right people for the job. Not a box ticking exercise, not a token female. That would be my plan. We just have the best people, and if they happen to be male, female, brown, green, white, yellow, purple, don't care, gay, straight, transgender, don't give a toss, so long as they're the right people for the job. How can you estimate salvage in a building? Here we demolish buildings for salvage only. That's our friend over in Saudi Arabia. I would suggest, I'll drop you a line after the show. There is a company called C&D Consultancy who will be able to advise you on precisely that, and they are already working in your part of the world, sir. So watch your inbox after. I'm just going to write down AY Mottaiar. I'll drop your line after the show, and I'll put you in touch with C&D Consultancy. Good on her, says Dan Cullen. Well done, young woman. Yeah, but why are we still women in? It's like Black Lives Matter. Yeah, they do. All lives matter. Yeah, I wrote an article. It must be 5 years ago now, possibly even more, featuring El Paget down at Kent Demolition, and I wrote the entire article talking about this demolition supervisor and what they did for a living and everything else. And literally the last one was oh, and by the way, it's a woman, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. How did we get to the point where you apply for a job and you are qualified to do the job, you've proved it, you've got your competence cards and everything else, and then somebody says, so, do you have boobs and ovaries? Yes, not me, but, yes, I do. See, you're not really up to the job then. What? What the hell? Jake the Peg was this, with many extra legs. That was a suggestion for our stomping machine. Mick Norton reminiscing about females in the industry. This was early doors, I have to say. 2 females operated our D6D dozer fleet when I worked in the West Midlands in 1989. Highly skilled in all applications, and although they took a bit of stick from the guys, they were a tremendous asset to the organisation. And therein lies the issue. I don't think that stick from the guys has diminished at all. At all. I was listening to a BBC Sounds podcast over the weekend by a lady called Mariana Spring. And I think the show is called "Why Do You Hate Me?" and it's talking about online abuse. And the reason I got into it, there was one episode about a Premier League footballer who had received death threats, and Lord alone knows what else. But the one that followed on after that was talking about a female. She was a female footballer, but she'd become a football pundit on TV, and the amount of abuse that she took, including from the likes of Joey Barton, a professional footballer, a male professional footballer. Why? She earned her living playing football. Now, to my mind, and I'll say this completely honestly, when I hear a female commentator on football, it does jar a bit. But it doesn't jar a bit because they're bad. It jars a bit because I've spent 58 years listening to blokes doing it. And particularly if they've played. I mean, the woman that got the abuse, she played at the World Cup. Joey Barton never played at the World Cup. I've never played at the World Cup. She did. I think she's got every right to be there. Chris Ford saying, it's that hot, I'm going to take a cold shower. That was the Cat 973. Nothing beats a shift on a track loader. See, there are certain people that have been on a track loader. Jim Turner has not. He has, my apologies. Not been on a track shovel for a very long time. It was a 963. Great tool. A tidy small track shovel is on the wish list when funds allow. Totally. Footy says, nice one, Bobcat. That's what I like to see. Company giving back. Yeah, doesn't hurt, does it? Peter McKenna says, sorry, Mark, there's a group of us on Instagram that go in search of undesirable cretins who will report to the authorities. Hence the strange name for that machine. Up to now, we've ring-fenced over 80,000 men and women who prey on children, which goes back to his suggestion of that as a name for the machine. Didn't realise you were doing that. I'm sure you're aware of the legalities of tracking down people and stuff. I'm not going to bore you with it. It feels like such a weird thing to say. Yes, rid the world of paedophiles. I totally agree. But Peter, tread carefully, would you? Tread carefully. Let's have a look. Good on them people. In the UK, people are scared to death getting their hands dirty and help local communities. It's funny you should say that. Last place I lived, the builders took forever to finish the thing off, and they'd left rubbish all over the place. So we, as a community, basically went out one Sunday morning, gathered together all the builders' rubbish, and collected it all, put it outside their plant compound, so they couldn't get in on Monday morning. They were a lot tidier after that. So don't write off the UK completely. Andy Darvell. Question of the day. Mine is my motorbike with my cat who died last year. She's walking behind the front wheel. That's not how she died, is it? Please? Tell me that's not the case. Dan Cullen says, I can't see a skill shortage. There's so many people are texting me crying for work, past 7,500 or 7,400 on my groups now. And yet there is. I think part of it is the regionality of construction work. There are bits of the country. I mean, London is still seemingly going great guns. You've only got to look at the skyline, which I did last weekend. Look at the skyline of London, and there are cranes aplenty, loads and loads of work going on. Go somewhere else, not so much. Footy has also got a tattoo inside his lip saying Footy. Is that in case you forget who you are? Let us know. Question of the day. Thought Ken would have a pizza or his car. Yes, he probably should. Andy Darvell says, the wallpaper on WhatsApp is my Cocker Spaniel wearing a reindeer antlers, a reindeer antlers hairband a few years ago. You're one of those folks that dress as your dog, are you? Yes. Peter McKenna says, cost of labour in the UK really too cheap if you consider the wages we were on in the 80s. 90s wages haven't really gone up today in real terms. But therein lies the issue, doesn't it? The moment that you rack up wages, you have a major impact on inflation, which then impacts everything else. I'm not saying governing the country is easy, but Dan Cullen says 100% house building is a fix. I think the CMA will be reporting back on that precise thing in the very near future. When am I going for donuts at Kent Demolition? I have a bit of an issue at the moment. I've not bored you with the details. So you might recall, there used to be a guy who came on this show, haven't spoken to in an age, actually, a guy called James Doble, who had a lot of very serious health issues. Part of which was he was on dialysis. You might recall, if you've been around for long enough, my father-in-law was on the verge of going on dialysis. Well, he is now on dialysis. And because I'm at my busiest in the morning, my wife is at the busiest in the afternoon. When is his dialysis? It's in the afternoon. So I've now got the job of fetching and carrying him quite a bit. And one of the days that we tend to do that is on a Friday. I'm working on it. I've got a week coming up because it fluctuates timing and everything else. So my plan is to get down to Kent Demolition, mainly because it's donuts and free donuts. AK Demolition just joined us over on Instagram. Good morning to you. What we got here? Jim Turner says the HS2 is just a case of overmanagement. Too many non-productive wages to pay. Too many compound site offices filled with people shuffling paper and sending emails. When stages should have been put out for tender and then left to get on with it. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. When you've had to endure football commentary by the likes of Jimmy Hill, I would listen to anybody as an alternative. Yes, do you remember Jimmy Hill? Always thought he had it in for West Ham. Always, with the possible exception of Jonathan Pearce, who is actually a West Ham fan. I think most commentators have got it in for West Ham. But Jimmy Hill in particular. And what was with that chin? Younger generation, go and find a photograph of Jimmy Hill and try to figure out how somebody grows a chin that long. Dan Cullen says, look at Lana Edwards, one of the top operators in the UK. She's been in machines all her life. Yeah, totally right. She is Lady Lana over on LinkedIn. She most certainly is. Andy Darvell says the motorbike was most definitely parked. That's not why the cat died. I'm glad to hear it. UK construction main problem? Phone staring millennial snowflakes. All right. Listen, there's a bit of me that kind of agrees with that. There is a bit of me that kind of agrees with that. I think that's probably going to do us. How long have we been going? An hour and 21 minutes. Good Lord. I do need to drop a note over to our friend over in Saudi Arabia. I've also got to get our friend, the bearded plant operator's address so that I can send him his winnings, his Caterpillar hat, which is sat right by my side still, to remind me to do that. There you are. That's what he's won. He is now a VIP visitor. I'm sure he's been to JCB. If he hasn't, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to welcome it. Craig, I'm heading out the door. So no, at this stage, do I bring up the CITB? No, but feel free. Feel free to do that tomorrow. I'm not laughing at you, Craig. I'm laughing at the comment from Gary Muirhead, who says Jimmy Hill's chin was like a pigeon's landing board. And it would have accommodated several pigeons. Andy Darvell says, have a fabulous day and week. I'm off to Sharm el Sheikh tomorrow for a week. Have a fantastic time. Enjoy the sunshine, my friend. Everybody, go and have a fantastic day. I'm back here again tomorrow. Yes, let's go and spread some love in the world, as I've been so bloody negative this morning. I'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Everybody except Andy Delvell. I will expect you all then. Till then, everybody, have a good day. All the best.